Hi guys, today's video is going to be about how do you know who to trust when talking about and saying about your mental illness, and where do you sort of start. And as you know, I've talked about it before that I sort of got forced to talk about mine, but my mum's quite perceptive and she knew something wasn't going on, so she sort of dragged me to the doctor. So the first person I ever told was my doctor, and I think that's why I told him first, not only because my mum dragged me there and he wouldn't sort of let me get away with locking myself in my room, but it's confidential. He can't go around telling your family. He's a stranger, except from if he's only seen me medically. He doesn't really know me that well. So it was comforting, it was comforting then to sort of blurt it all out and say everything. And I knew he wouldn't judge me. I knew he couldn't judge me because he's a doctor and he had advice, and he's obviously seen people like this before. So after I sort of said it, I did feel afterwards, when I walked out of the doctor's office, I felt calm. For the first time in a while, I really felt calm. And I think if you're really struggling with the idea of telling somebody for the first time, I think, if you don't want to seek professional help like a doctor, then maybe a stranger, like, there's this group, or there's loads of groups, or there's helplines. I mean, I've rung up helplines and talked to them, but I honestly think if you're really having trouble like I did with the idea of having to get so personal and say all these things that are going on in your head, I think it's easiest if you do it to a stranger rather than someone that's so close to you. So that's sort of when you have to tell somebody next, it's not as hard. And that's sort of what made it easier for me to sort of tell my family then. Because I had to tell my mum, because she was, she was the one that sort of knew something wasn't right, and I knew I couldn't keep it from her forever. But I think that's one of the horriblest things I've ever had to do, was seeing the look on my mum and my family's face when I said that I self-harm. I tried to commit suicide a few times. I have a suicide folder with notes for them, and how I wouldn't be here today, or if I hadn't seen that episode of Glee, or I would be, and I'd be in serious health and, problems. And it's sort of seeing their faces when you tell them what you've been going through, but also what you've done to yourself. And they sort of look at you, and you can tell in their face that they're horrified, but they're also sort of just really sad. And I think that's one of the horriblest things I will probably ever experience, is having to see my family sort of know that I would rather die than sort of be with them. And that was one of the most painfulest things I've ever had to do. But to credit them, they were amazing for me. They really stepped up. I mean, my mum has been my absolute rock. She would go with me to all my therapy appointments, She would stay up with me when I had bad days, stay home with me on bad days. She would distract me. She would help me wean myself off self-harm. She made sure that everything that she could possibly do, she's been doing it for me, and I just owe a lot to her. But also my sisters have done a lot. They were very supportive. They would distract me by playing board games, taking me on days out, sending me quotes and pictures about it's okay, to struggle, buying me inspirational quotes to go on my walls, and just often hugging me and telling me it's okay. And I honestly think my family has been amazing through this, and I really couldn't have done it without them. So after after it was a few weeks of having my family's constant support that I realised that I couldn't hide it, because I was in school, and and teachers had to know, because it was affecting my schoolwork, it was affecting everything, and they had to know why I had to leave for therapist appointments, why I was withdrawn. So I knew that I couldn't hide it from my friends any longer, and I was really struggling with who to trust, which is what this video is about. Is how do you choose that person or people that you trust enough to tell your most personal secret to? And I really struggled with it. I mean, I think a lot of people have friends, but then they have a close-knit group of friends, and I really didn't want to tell them, because I don't know, a lot of people do this when they have depression. Either they put on like a mask where people leave them alone, they're very isolated, or like me, I put on a really smiley, happy mask when I was at school, listening to everybody else's problems, acting like I was all fine and life was great. And a part of me didn't want to shatter their illusion of what I'd been doing for months, because once I knew I told them, you get the pity eyes, which I think is one of the most, it's sweet that they sort of feel sorry for you and they're upset, but it's also not helpful when they look at you and think, and they give you those sad pity eyes, and it's just not very nice to know that your friends pity you and look at you and think of you like that. And I was absolutely dreading it. So I was really struggling with who to tell, and I knew that I couldn't keep it any longer, because teachers kept talking to me, asking me if I was okay, when my next appointments were, because my teachers worked amazingly, and I could see my bestest friend Abby was sort of cluing on that something wasn't quite right, and I sort of had an idea that I wanted to tell Abby first, because if you've got somebody who's very loyal to you, will drop anything if you need them, is always there for you, makes you laugh, and is generally just an amazing person, then I think it's safe to say you could, and you trust them enough, you've got to feel comfortable with them, because this is your deepest secret. You are telling them that you're not okay, either you have bad anxiety issues, you've got depression, self-harm, you've been suicidal, you've got grief. It's a big thing to say, and it needs to be with the right person, and you need to know that person, you need to feel comfortable with that person, because that person is going to be the person you talk to about this, because everybody needs somebody who isn't a professional or your family to go to talk to, and just let it all out. And it can be a stranger online, it can be a helpline, but it also could be a really close friend that you trust. And I knew that after a while I had to tell Abby, and I was sort of prepared for days in advance of what I would say, and give her the bare minimum, because I didn't want people to know. Because back then, when you first get it, mental illness is perceived as if you got it, you're crazy, you're nuts. It's a horrible thing to have if you have mental illness, is what it's perceived as. And when I had to tell people, that's what I thought. I thought they were going to think I'm a freak, they're going to laugh, they're going to not be my friend anymore, they're going to judge me, and it caused my anxiety issues to rise even worse. And point of when the idea of even going to school to have to face them, I was having panic attacks. So, as I said, I prepared for days in advance, but as a lot of things, it doesn't go as planned, because we had a free period at school, and we were sat in the cafe, and Abby sort of cornered me in the table, and she was like, right, what's wrong? I know something's going on for months now, tell me what's wrong. And I didn't do it in the nicest way, like I planned. I sort of blurted it all out, how my mood had sort of gone like that, and I suddenly had depression, I had anxiety, I self-harm, I've tried committing suicide. And I just remember, all after saying it, felt relieved because somebody knows. You know, I can go to school knowing that at least somebody knows. And I remember crying, and I can hear people around us, you know, walking around, chatting, laughing. And then I remember looking up and seeing Affy, and she was crying. And a part of me felt awful because I just dumped all this on her in the middle of school and everything, and I felt really bad, and I felt like she was crying because, you know, I just did that to her. But really she was crying for me. You know, she was crying for me because she was upset for me because of what I was going through. And once she sort of calmed down, we both calmed down, and she gave me a hug, and we sort of just talked all through that free period, lunch, and, you know, the rest of the day. And after that, it makes you feel strong, you know. She gave me courage to sort of fight harder, because if I had my family, I had my doctor behind me, but, you know, a doctor can't judge you, your family sort of has to love you. So knowing that, you know, a friend who sort of, they choose to care about you was sticking behind me meant the world to me, and it sort of gave me more courage to fight. And after that, when you've trusted that person and told that person, when telling other people, it gets so much easier. Like, I would never have been able to do this video, the blogs, the whole support group, if I hadn't told, you know, my family and Abby, because they gave me the courage, and they sort of, you know, they sort of made it okay for me to, you know, they helped me understand that I don't have to be put together all the time. I don't have to be perfect, and I can be messed up, I can be upset, I can be sad without having to feel bad for it. And, you know, and I wanted to, this is how the group sort of created, I wanted to help other people like that. But I just honestly think, if you have, I'd honestly recommend that if you're having trouble people telling people, if you don't want to go to professional help, that's fine, you know, professional help isn't for anyone, but you do need to at least tell somebody, because it feels great to get it out. I mean, it can be, you know, people from the support group, me, complete strangers, that's fine. It can be your doctor, it can be your family, it can be a really close friend at school. And I promise, once you tell that somebody, you know, as soon as you blurt it out, it is like, oh my God, I can't believe it. And then when you see the reaction and you see that everything goes okay, and you feel a sense of calm and relief once you've told them, it's honestly worth it. And it does give you a new sense of courage to sort of fight a little bit harder. So thank you again for all the views, comments, messages, for the support group, and also for my mental health state. It really means a lot, and I will continue to do these videos and the blogs. Thank you very much.